This is Arab Talk on KPOO 89.5 FM in San Francisco. This is Arab Talk with Jess and Jamal. I'm Jess Hannam.
And I'm Jamal Dajani.
Jamal, Israel's murderous campaign in Gaza continues unabated, despite attempts to frame the situation as allowing humanitarian aid into Gaza with the new Israeli-American plan to feed the over 2.2 million starving Palestinians in Gaza. The Israeli military continues to open fire, killing and murdering innocent civilians, only trying to get food for their children. It is a catastrophic situation. It is a blight on an already devastating genocide in Gaza, Jamal. We're going to be covering some of those stories today, including the president of the International Association of Genocide Scholars, Melanie O'Brien, has declared Israel's actions in Gaza as a genocide. We're also going to be reporting on a report that just came out just this last week, Jamal, where Israel actually admitted to arming Palestinian militia groups in Gaza to counter Hamas, including a man accused of looting aid trucks. It's a very interesting story, which needs a lot more context, obviously. On another story, Jamal, that we've been reporting on in terms of the collapse of support for Israel in the United States, we're going to be talking about how that same collapse of support for Israel has been happening in Europe, across the EU, across actually globally. But we're going to focus on Europe today. And we're going to talk also about how the United States, again, has vetoed yet another resolution calling for a ceasefire in Gaza. So the complicity between Israel and the United States continues. We're going to be covering all those stories, Jamal. But before we get to that, this is a big story, and it's the Freedom Flotilla going to Gaza. And we're going to hear an interview that you did recently with Huwaida Arraf. She spoke to us from Sicily, where the Madleen has set sail to Gaza, carrying on board badly needed food and medical supplies. 12 international activists, peace activists, including the French member of the European Parliament, Rima Hassan, and climate activist Greta Thunberg, are on this flotilla, Jamal. They're sailing right now, and Huwaida provided updates from the Madleen talking about the difficulties and challenging facing this voyage. And we just heard a report just over the wire recently, Jamal, that Israel has vowed to stop this boat, and they have a history of, committing violence against these peaceful protests. So this is a very important story, Jamal.
That's right, Jess. And this is a developing story, obviously. So by the time, we air this, things could change. But the latest updates is that the Madleen is about 150 nautical miles off Gaza. Right. So it's more near the Egyptian waters. And as you've mentioned, Israel has threatened that's going to intercept it. And the recent report that I've heard is that now communications have been, interfered with on the Madleen. They're trying to jam it, so they kind of lose connection with the rest of the world. So I hope, everyone on that boat remains safe. But let's watch and listen to Huwaida Arraf. The Madleen set sail from Sicily on June 1st as part of the renewed Freedom Flotilla Coalition to open a humanitarian corridor to Gaza and bring global attention to Israel's siege on the enclave, who has blockaded entry of all food, water, and essential medical supplies since March 3rd. 12 international volunteer peace activists are on board, including international climate activist Greta Thunberg and French MP Rima Hassan, and the boat is stocked with food, medical supplies, and diapers for children, prosthetics, and other supplies. A previous attempt to deliver aid on a ship called Conscience was obstructed when drones bombed it before it had even launched from Malta. This mission has received broad international support, including a send-off speech from Game of Thrones' Liam Cunningham, who declared the flotilla crew are heroes and that Israel's genocide is not just on Palestinians, but on the whole human race. Nevertheless, there are also threats by the IDF and others like Senator Lindsey Graham, who tweeted that he hoped Greta Thunberg could swim. Huwaida Arraf is one of the coalition founders. She's going to give us an update on the Madleen's progress across the Mediterranean. And let's begin with this. Well, thank you for coming on the show, Huwaida, on a short notice. And I know that you are, in Sicily. Give us an update on the boat's course. There was a report of drones circling the boat and a helicopter passing by.
Yes. First of all, thank you, Jamal, so much for having me and for your continued efforts and programming to educate. So invaluable. We set sail, as you said, on June 1st, and the helicopter that you mentioned was, while we were still in port, we were worried that it would be an attempt to stop the vessel because over the years, unfortunately, there has been so much bureaucratic sabotage that kept us from even leaving port. And this is greatly disturbing because it's evidence, further evidence of European complicity with Israel's siege on Gaza and now with its genocidal conduct, because not only are states themselves not challenging Israel's illegal closure of Gaza, but they were doing Israel's dirty work by obstructing us and preventing us from leaving. So we were worried that Italy would prevent us from leaving, and that's what the helicopter circulating the vessel before it was set to depart was. But thankfully, it did not interfere. The boat set sail. It is in its fourth day right now sailing. Last night, at a little after 11 p.m. local time, the team on board did spot a drone, which caused a lot of concern because, as you mentioned, just 1 month ago on May 2nd, Israel used a drone to bomb another ship that was set to head towards Gaza, carrying humanitarian aid and carrying dozens of international volunteers from over 20 countries. Just hours before we were scheduled to board that vessel, a drone was seen overhead and it fired 2 missiles at the boat, setting it ablaze, completely disabling that boat and injuring 4 of our volunteers on board. There were 18 volunteers already on board and the rest were due to board in a few hours. What was disturbing about that, again, I will highlight, is that it was a case of Israel going into European airspace, European territorial waters, to bomb a civilian vessel, and not one European country condemned this. In fact, Malta, we were off the coast of Malta, just 14 miles off the coast of Malta, in European waters, and Malta treated us like we were the criminals. It did not cooperate with us. It did not allow the vessel to come into port so that people could get off the ship so we could start to repair the ship. It's a long story to go into all the details, but suffice it to say that it was another example of European complicity with Israel's crimes. The drones that we saw last night, thankfully, were not armed drones. It turns out, we are still investigating, but it turns out they were either Hellenic Coast Guard drones or Frontex drones. Either way, they were surveillance drones, which raises another concern because they came around more than once. That was that first sighting, then a few hours later, 2 drones, and it kept circling the vessel, surveilling the vessel. So this raises a question and a concern as to, is Greece or even the European Union through Frontex surveilling for Israel? Is it going to provide this intelligence information to Israel, which then it will use to launch another lethal attack on our vessel, which Israel has already issued its threats that it is going to attack the vessel. Again, unlawful, illegal. Israel has absolutely no legal basis, no legal authority to stop this vessel, which is sailing in complete accordance with international law, unarmed, no threat to Israel, and going from international waters into Palestinian waters, which Israel has no legal authority over. And this was confirmed by the International Court of Justice in July 2024. Israel has no legal authority and no right to be in the occupied Palestinian territory. So it has absolutely no basis to stop us. And yet it has begun issuing its threats.
As you mentioned, the Conscience was bombed by drones. I mean, it wasn't even allowed to leave the harbor. But this time, the Madleen was able to leave the harbor. Do you think, I'm thinking of two things. One, that you have now so many celebrity support, it prevented, for example, the Italian authorities from preventing you from leaving. And two, there is a shift in sentiment in Europe, even within governments, just within the past couple of weeks, European governments are calling for a ceasefire and demanding that Israel should allow aid and so forth. Do you feel that kind of played a role in allowing you to sail?
It could have, and you're right that we are seeing this shift now in some of the language being used, some stronger language being used against Israel and some threats of sanctions. But it cannot be stressed strongly enough that these words are not enough. These threats are not enough. It is way past time for the governments of the world to act. And it is only because these governments, led by the United States, but supported by Europe, have provided Israel with impunity for decades that we are at the situation where we are now, that the world is witnessing a live stream genocide and Israel thinks it's above any law. It's not hiding it. It's soldiers at every level. At every level, it's putting it out in the open because it believes, it is untouchable. Their soldiers are untouchable, and that's what the world has allowed Israel to believe. So it is way past time. This genocide is just as much on the United States and Europe as it is on Israel. And so therefore, while the language is changing, they need to act. They need to be let me put it this way, Jamal. They want the United States, Israel, Europe wants us to accept a world order where a country that is on trial for genocide, that the World Court has found is plausibly committing a genocide in Gaza, and even governments are saying its starvation campaign is blatantly a war crime. They are agreeing. They are still wanting us to accept that Israel gets to decide if aid can get into Gaza. That is absurd. Where do you accept that a country genociding a people gets to decide if that people is entitled to humanitarian aid? And yet that's what they want us to accept. And that's what the world is accepting by not forcing Gaza open, by not driving their trucks right through Rafah, by not putting their own aid on these ships and coming with us. I don't know if you've seen the Madleen. It's a beautiful ship, but it is a very small ship carrying 12 people. We did pack it with as much humanitarian aid as we can carry, but what is that? It's not even a drop in 5 oceans. But what we're trying to say is the people of Gaza have a right to receive us, not only for aid, because people of Gaza don't want to live on aid. They're entitled to their freedom, and they are entitled to the dignity that everybody else is entitled to. So we're not doing this to perpetuate just a humanitarian aid, a situation where just we're bringing in humanitarian aid. We're doing it to challenge the very notion that Israel has a right to control what gets into Gaza and what gets out of Gaza. And it is just outrageous that governments continue to allow this to happen. So we're hoping that that little boat, the Madleen, is leading the way, and that other organizations and that countries will actually live up to their obligations and follow us. And then you also asked about the international attention and the support. Yes, support is coming through from people with high profiles, Greta and others. As you mentioned, Liam Cunningham was here. Also, we had members of parliament from different European countries here supporting us from afar. A few days ago, we had UN special rapporteurs, a dozen of them, issue a statement calling for safe passage for the ship. The world is horrified by what it's seeing, and it's just our governments, those that have the power to change things right now, that refuse to do so and are continuing to see and to enable Israel to slaughter and to starve to death children and civilians at large. So there is a change. The world is horrified. The world is acting, and we hope that that action will end up bringing about a change. But it's been far too long, and every single day, countless Palestinians are being maimed and killed and starved. So the urgency is so high, and the Madleen is on its way to Gaza. We hope it reaches Gaza. But whatever happens, we're not going to stop. We are, as I'm speaking to you, readying yet another ship to go.
Well, at the same time, IDF representatives are already publicizing their plans to intercept the boat. And then you have virulent attacks, such as the noxious tweets by Senator Lindsey Graham. I mean, how threatening is this?
Well, it is a threat. Everybody on the land team, everybody on board the Madleen knows that no one's safety is guaranteed. Of course, we are trying. We are trying to put pressure on governments, demanding that they demand Israel guarantees safe passage to the vessel, that it stands down and does not attack or in any way intercept the Madleen. But have been before. In 2010, Israel killed 10 of our volunteers and injured dozens and abducted the hundreds who were on the 2010 Freedom Flotilla. And so we have no, we're fully aware of the violence that Israel is capable of, especially at this time that they just think that they're completely untouchable. And we're relying really on the eyes of the world to be on the Madleen, on people to be pressuring their members of Congress to their representatives to put pressure on Israel to speak up. And we hope that we can keep that vessel safe, because that vessel represents really the conscience of the world. And when it comes to, people and obnoxious comments like those of Senator Lindsey Graham, really, he should be ashamed. Greta Thunberg puts him to shame. That young activist, 22 years old, has more wisdom and dignity and conscience and humanity in her little finger than he has in his whole body of his whole life, let me say. At this time where we're witnessing a genocide, where every day you cannot avoid the images of emaciated Palestinian children, of decapitated children, of dismembered children, all acts of horror and aggression being committed by Israel against a defenseless civilian population. At this time, when the world is horrified at what they're seeing, you have a United States senator, that is making fun and potentially inciting to violence or wishing death or harm on people who are trying to stop this genocide. He really should be ashamed of himself, and anyone who votes for him or continues to vote for him should also be ashamed.
Talk about the volunteers. Their dedication. They're putting their lives in danger. I've noticed volunteers from France, from Turkey, Brazil, and other countries, that they've come together to board this ship. They know the dangers, they know the risk, and yet they're doing it.
Absolutely. I will quote, as I mentioned, Greta Thunberg, who is, again, even in her young age, so wise and committed, and knows the importance of doing this despite the dangers. What she says, and I think it represents everyone on that boat and everyone who has worked or ever been on a boat or will be on future boats, what we believe is the danger of not doing this is even higher, because what Israel and the United States and those that support Israel right now, what they are trying to promote is a world order where might is right and no one is protected. They are trampling all over the law and institutions that are supposed to protect people. And now it's Palestinians that are being brutalized, but tomorrow it could be any one of us, and that is not a world that any one of us is willing to live in. And therefore, again, the dangers of not doing anything is even higher than whatever threat Israel poses. I say that, but I do want to emphasize that we believe that we can do this together, that we can break the siege. One small boat at sea alone isn't going to do it. It's all of us watching and sharing the news and calling our elected members of parliament, calling the media and demanding that they cover this. It is really making sure that this little boat represents millions and the conscience of millions and millions of people around the world that makes it so strong. But that takes every single one of us. And if we all do that, that little boat could reach Gaza.
Well, do you feel other nationals will join, or other countries will provide other boats to join you? You're saying you're readying another boat to leave, and it's really a grassroots movement, and it depends on both individuals and hopefully now countries. And my other question is, now since you have these internationals on the boat, do you think they'll receive any sort of protection from their countries should Israel tries to intercept or attacks the boat?
So there are a lot of questions in that question. Let me try to answer. First of all, with regard to the protections of the people, we are sailing in complete alliance with international law. We are very legal, left legally from Sicily, from European, Italian waters into international waters. We're headed towards Palestinian waters. We are a civilian vessel carrying humanitarian aid. We constitute no threat to anyone. Israel has no legal authority to institute a blockade, to maintain a maritime closure over Gaza at all, not only because it has no authority to control Gaza, but also because it is using this closure and blockade in order to further its genocide. And it's having such a disproportionate is not even the right word, but in the legal terms, they use the term disproportionate effect or harm on the civilian population. So this blockade is illegal. And because it is illegal, Israel has no right to intercept peaceful vessels coming in or trying to break the blockade. And because they have no right to intercept vessels trying to break an illegal blockade, they have no right to use force to effectuate that interception. So we are sailing in accordance with international law and international humanitarian law, the laws of the seas. Yes, protect these civilians. The ship that we are on, the Madleen, is flagged in the United Kingdom. The United Kingdom also has an obligation to communicate to Israel that it's not to touch its vessel and to actually let Israel know that it will face consequences if it intervenes with this vessel, because actually the people who are on the Madleen are carrying out what is the United Kingdom's obligation. Every country in the world has an obligation when it is on notice that a genocide is potentially taking place. And in January 2024, the World Court put the world on notice that there is potentially a genocide being carried out. All countries of the world have an obligation to do what they can to stop it. And not only have these countries not been doing anything, they have been collaborating with Israel. So these 12 civilians aboard a UK flagged ship are doing what the UK should be doing, and it is obligated to protect those civilians. And also the other countries of the civilians on board must do the same, communicate to Israel that it should bring absolutely no harm to its civilians, or it will be held to account. And when you asked about other civilians, other people ready to go, Jamal, I can't tell you how many people are ready and willing to go, and how difficult it is to actually narrow down the list of people who will get on each vessel. People want to do something. People want to be able to say that in this time of genocide, they were not silent. They did something. And even if it is to go confront the most brutal, ruthless, immoral army in the world, at a risk to their safety, they're willing to do this. And should governments or others be doing it? Absolutely. But thus far, it has been a very grassroots civil society initiative, which is not, it's not easy to organize to get these votes, but we will keep doing it. You know who should be doing it also? Not only states, but international humanitarian organizations. You have thousands of trucks waiting at Rafah, waiting for Israel to give them permission to enter, when we know and we see that Israel is trying to destroy the international humanitarian infrastructure that has been set up to work in Gaza and that has worked across conflict zones around the world. Israel is setting up to destroy it. And all of these organizations need to do more than just issue statements. They need to work together and actually defy Israel's closure. They need to work together and drive through Rafah together, or they need to put their aid on boats and come with us. Enough with this etiquette. And Israel has turned Gaza into an extermination camp. And we, the civilians of the world, including these organizations that are focused on humanitarianism, need to stop waiting for the executioners to open the gates. We need to break them down.
Well, you've mentioned these humanitarian organizations that are unable to enter, but as you know, I want to get your opinion on the so-called Gaza Humanitarian Foundation that the United States and Israel set up, and basically people went to get their aid and they were killed. I mean, do you expect other human rights organizations, for example, to take that risk? Because they know Israel has a precedent of not only killing Palestinians, but they've also attacked the World Kitchen, they attacked the UNRWA employees and the other UN employees. So how can they basically, kind of push their way through Gaza to deliver aid?
Absolutely, what you say is 100%. Israel has shown no respect for anyone, not humanitarian worker, not journalist, not civilian, no one. But we need to act together in this time. The so-called Gaza Humanitarian Foundation that is set up, a formal UN official, I liked his words for it. He called it the genocide humanitarian fig leaf. It really is a militarized political initiative that is masquerading as a humanitarian aid project. And what it is doing is weaponizing aid in the most cynical, disgusting way. It is doing it in a way to further surveil Palestinians and to use the hunger of children against their families and to push Palestinians into a tighter and tighter enclave. It's literally only a sliver of land that is left for Palestinians to exist on. So it is using aid to further its ethnic cleansing plans. And we have seen the horrific images of hungry people waiting in line for small parcels of food in the most degrading way, on top of the mechanism that they are using, making them walk long distances and then being corralled. On top of that, then to open fire on people and just massacres. This is so far from anything that is humanitarian, and they intend it deliberately to, again, take the place of the infrastructure that's already set up. Institutions like the United Nations, UNRWA, you have ANIRA, you have the World Food Program, you have so many others that are set up and know how to do this. But Israel intends to and wants to, and deliberately with the United States, destroy this, because this project furthers Israel's ethnic cleansing plan. It can try to say, here we're letting aid in, but only a trickle, and it is done in this way that is not sustainable and that degrades and kills people trying to get a little bit of food, making people all the more desperate. They can be further pushed out. It is one of the most cynical things I've ever seen, and it's disgusting. And should organizations be doing something about it? Yes. And if we act together, if we act together, then it's possible. I'm not saying, we all know that nobody can guarantee safety in this environment and what we've seen Israel do. But the alternative is to just accept that Israel is doing this, and it is a threat to the entire world. These big organizations, the Norwegian Refugee Council, the International Committee, the Red Cross, the United Nations, and all of them, they have their political contacts also, right? A lot of them are very tied to the governments that hosts them. And if they declare and if they organize that they're going to do something like this together, governments will be forced to follow. I mean, we have a lot of power. We're just not utilizing it, or they're not utilizing it. We're trying to do what we can.
Before I let you go, just give me a quick update where the Madleen is, or about now, the latest, and how far is it from Gaza, and what's the the spirit of the people on it? How are they feeling?
I have not checked the exact location before. I did not check before coming on with you, but they are sailing the winds, the Mediterranean has been smooth, and so they should be past Greece right now, sailing towards Gaza. The winds have been pushing them south a little bit, so they are, if you can imagine, southeast of Greece on their way to Gaza. If all goes well and on time, and we follow the planned route, they will be, what is today, Wednesday? About 3 to 4 days, they could be in Gaza. Inshallah, that of course what we're hoping for. As for the feelings on board, the spirits are very high. There was, again, tension last night, not knowing what the drones were, but they handled it so well. We immediately, when they spotted the drone, we went live so we can monitor with them what's happening, so the world could see what's happening. And they feel like the world is with them. As soon as we announced and they went live that they had been circled by drones, thousands of people went live tuned in to their live and took action. So they feel that the world is with them, and that is so important. And by being with them, of course, that means we're with the people of Gaza. And so they're continuing on with this spirit and with the hopes that we will reach Gaza, but also prepared for what might come.
Huwaida Arraf, thank you again for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Jamal.
That's the voice in the face of Huwaida Arraf. She spoke to us from Sicily on the Madleen. It's a boat carrying 12 international activists from Sicily into Gaza. It includes Greta Thunberg, the globally known climate activist, Jamal. I mean, listening to Huwaida, there's a big history to this, as we know, and she described that, and she is quite concerned about all of the difficulties and challenges they had. But her resolve and the resolve of all the people on this ship, Jamal, trying to bring much needed supplies into Gaza, medical and food supplies, is really heroic. And as we said before we aired this piece, we're all very concerned about all of the participants, because Israel's history of how they treat peaceful, nonviolent activists is very brutal. They may not stop at causing harm to these individuals. We're very concerned about it.
Listen, just this is a small boat. It's going to make a very, 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 very little dent in the humanitarian crisis in Gaza. Nevertheless, but it has a message, a strong message. You have 12 brave activists. It's a combination of politicians, human rights activists, lawyers, environmentalists, and so forth, trying to send a message that this basically siege on Gaza has to end. People have to eat. They need to receive supplies. And you know what? If Israel attacks the boat, this is a human rights violation. It is an international, it's a war crime, because They are going nowhere near Israeli shores. They're going to Gaza. They have declared their intention very clearly. They have said what they're carrying with them. They're not carrying any weapons or any counterbands or whatever. It's just basically food, medicine, diapers, sanitary stuff for women, and so forth. And to just like really prevent them from going there is horrible. If they get in, maybe other brave countries will send similar ships, because obviously we have all these trucks standing, basically prevented from entering, with 1,000 or more trucks entering there. This new organization they tried to bring people to get some small supplies was a death trap, for them. And so hopefully other countries will try to ship some aid through the sea. People forget Gaza is on the seashore. That should be the easiest operation to bring food supplies to them. Israel is has this total siege, preventing everything from the air, from the ground, from the sea. It's kind of crazy. But let's move on to our next stories. So the head of the world's largest academic association on genocide has declared Israel's actions in Gaza, what? Surprise, a genocide.
Surprise. Yeah.
Everyone in the U.S., and some countries are in denial. Dr. Melanie O'Brien, president of the International Association of Genocide Scholars, outlined her legal opinion in an interview, recently, ahead of I guess a conference that they were going to be talking about, basically talking about genocide. And I have some quotes from her saying, applying the legal definitions of genocide as found in the Genocide Convention and the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court, I would determine that what is happening in Gaza constitutes a genocide. The definition involves acts committed with intent to destroy, in whole or in part, a national, ethnic, racial, or religious group. These include killing or imposing conditions meant to bring about physical destruction.
Yeah.
I mean,
she's about 20 months too late, Jamal, but yeah, this is yet another, it's another example.
It's another, I think it's very important to have these things. I don't look at it 20 months late, because it's another verification on top of other verifications on top, you have the UN, the ICC, and so forth.
But Jamal, how much verification? I mean, I agree with you. It's important. This is an academic institution and a body of academics committed to the study of genocide. I get it. I do think it's important. But how many times do we have to hear this?
Well, obviously, as a Palestinian, they need to kill you not once, not twice, not thrice, not 100 times before they admit that they killed you. This is the way I look at it. Before the word starts, how long it took Europe now to change its opinion, and we're going to be talking about how Europe has changed its opinion. It seems that you have to prove your case 1,000,000 times to believe that you've been basically starved to death, killed, hunted down, treated like an animal, and whatever, before someone say, oh yeah, but we believe you. I mean, that's the reality. It's the sad reality, but that's what's happening now. And that's why, when we started talking a couple of years ago, when the world started waking up and talking about apartheid, before you used to say that A word, everybody jumped on top of you and said, how dare you, say that Israel is an apartheid state. It's the only democracy in the Middle East. And then you got Human Rights Watch and Amnesty International and the United Nations and the rapporteur, one after the other, publishing reports after reports, hundreds of pages. But try to convince a U.S. senator, even with all these reports, try to convince a congressman or a congresswoman with all these reports, they're going to be in denial. Of course, other countries are not in denial, but those are the facts. What we're doing here, we're providing the news of what we read and what we see from credible organizations. And this is another credible organization that did a study, and that's their conclusion.
Yeah, it's their conclusion. As I said, it's an academic group of scholars committed to the study of genocide. They've come to the conclusion that Israel is committing genocide. As part of that genocide, Jamal, they are starving children to death. And that starvation is happening right now, despite this kind of fake kind of narrative that they're somehow feeding the 2.2 million Palestinians in Gaza right now. It's a big joke, as I said at the top of the hour. And as you reiterated, this is just a death trap. I mean, Palestinian civilians are lining up for food, and they're being shot and killed immediately by the Israeli military. So this important study from the Association of Genocide Scholars is yet another kind of example of the kind of depraved Israeli military and government that is committing this act of genocide. And, you know, again, this is going to be one of the stories that we're going to cover today, but the entire world has turned on the Israeli government. No one buys the rubbish that they're peddling right now. It's over for them, but they are not going to stop. That's the problem right now. There's a race between like getting the word out and the Israeli kind of genocide machine that is, you know, basically exterminating Palestinians. And by the way, Jamal, not just in Gaza, in the West Bank and Jerusalem also. So we have to keep that in mind whenever we talk about what's happening in Gaza right now.
Yeah, and since we mentioned the word, but I have another story. I'm going to skip over the second one to the third one, and then we go back to that. Is when we mention Europe, Jess, a new survey. It's called the YouGov Eurotrack survey. Shows net favorability for Israel at record negative lows, and this is how they track it. They track it by country. You know, not a single country actually came into the positive. That if you go down the list, and we're not talking about governments now. You know, they're
talking about the people of Europe.
We're talking about the people, and they start, of course, the highest negative low for Israel comes in Spain, minus 55. They get minus 55, followed by Denmark, minus 54, followed by Italy, minus 52, followed by France, minus 48, the UK, minus 46, even Germany, and we know the German's government position, the people, minus 44. And those are the largest kind of groups that they surveyed across all 6 countries.
Yeah.
Just 6 to 16% view Israel's response in Gaza since October 7th as proportionate. You know, so they don't see the way they're looking at it, like the rest of the world is looking at it, this slaughter, this genocide that's happening. So when you're talking about they're losing the word, and even the Israelis themselves, if you read Haaretz and Yediot Ahronot and all their newspapers, and it's kind of funny because they're concerned about their image, and they continue the slaughter and the killing, and they're not worried about that people are dying, innocent people are getting killed, children are getting starved to death, and so forth. They're just, our image has been ruined. And, you know, Israel spends hundreds of millions of dollars on Hasbara in countries like the United States, Canada, the UK, and wherever. And that's gone down the drain. Basically, all that money is wasted because the public is not buying it. And we said right here in the United States, it's even for the first time, 53% of the population view Israel negatively in the United States, you know. And now you're seeing these numbers in Europe, and they're still continuing their starvation and their genocide.
Yeah, the numbers, I mean, people see Israel for what it is, this negative genocidal apartheid state. I mean, people of the world see it and they understand it. We're still in this dilemma, Jamal, where we have governments of Europe and the United States still shipping massive amounts of military, weaponry, bombs, military support, intelligence support. So we still see this kind of asymmetry between the reality of how people perceive this apartheid genocidal state called Israel and continuing to support it militarily. I mean, that's the big challenge that we have right now, right? Because, you know, the slaughter is continuing. The starvation is continuing. You know, Jamal, we didn't have time to talk about it, but 10,000 Palestinians in the West Bank just in this last month have been made homeless, and they've just announced the creation of yet another massive illegal colonial settlement block in the West Bank. So, I mean, yeah, there's negative opinion, but yet you still see the cover provided by European nations and by the United States for this genocide, this apartheid, this ethnic cleansing. I mean, that has to be confronted, obviously, at some point too.
Well, there's a disconnect between the population and their governments when it comes to their view on Israel and Palestine. And I believe it, including in the United States. I believe so. And that's why, these different laws people are trying to pass, like saying Free Palestine is anti-Semitic in Congress, and, targeting anyone who carries a banner saying, calling for ceasefire or end the genocide. And I find this really horrifying. Moving on to our next story, Jess, which I think is a very important story, and actually there's a background behind it. Israel has been arming a Palestinian militia in Gaza. That's an article people can find in the New York Times and The Guardian and many other publications. So they've been arming a Palestinian militia in Gaza as part of a broader effort to fight Hamas there. After a day-long controversy over the allegations, and Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu of Israel acknowledged on Thursday that the country had been working with clans, they call them clans, in Gaza. And actually, the person who outed the story is Avigdor Lieberman. Avigdor Lieberman accused Netanyahu because no one was talking about it. And finally, he had to kind of admit, we are doing this. And the story goes that two Israeli officials and another person familiar with the matter said the Israeli authorities had provided support, including weapons. This thug, by the way, he's the known thug thief, Yasser Abu Shahab, a well-known gunman who leads the militia in southern Gaza. This guy just was involved in stealing some of the aid early on when some trucks were allowed in. He was going with his armed militias and taking the aid and selling it to the people for 10 times the price or 100 times the price and so forth. He's a profiteer, He basically, Abu Shahab, commands a relatively small armed group in the southern Gaza city of Rafah. And since all the mayhem and now Hamas kind of is not in full control, he has been emboldened, especially when Israel is now supplying him with money and weapons. As I said, he was looting trucks and reselling truckloads of humanitarian aid intended for hungry Gazan. Now, just
go ahead,
one thing on this, having said that, because people might not remember, but Israel supported Hamas
in the beginning
because they wanted to destabilize Fatah and destabilize the Palestinian Authority because they didn't want to have peace. That's not a new game. It's an old game, and they're finding this opportunity now to do that, to kind of, divide and rule.
Well, I think that's right, Jamal. That's exactly what I was going to say. This is an old Israeli tactic. It's part of their narrative that they're trying to spin about what's happening in Gaza right now with Hamas. No doubt Hamas has suffered tremendous losses. There's no doubt about that. But the idea now that they're coming out and saying that they're supporting these, quote, clans, all you have to do is scratch below the surface a little bit and see that they're not clans per se. They're really just thugs who have tried to profit from the genocide and these aid trucks coming in. The Israeli government, as you rightly pointed out, even from within, you have Ehud Olmert, you have all these opinion pieces. Israelis are wringing their hands after 20 months of, genocide. Oh, our image. And this is Netanyahu's attempt to try to, continue to stay in power, right? Because you won't find a single kind of writing in Israeli press supporting Netanyahu right now. It's kind of interesting. He's coming out with these really crazy plans about, supporting these thugs in Gaza. So, I mean, I don't make much of it, to be honest, Jamal, because the bigger picture is really this grotesque starvation as part of their genocide. And, the fact that that aid program that they've instituted with the United States has been a catastrophic failure.
And our final story, Jess, is that the
Here
United
we go
States
again. Here we
vetoes
go.
yet another resolution calling for ceasefire. How many times have you heard this administration or other administrations before, oh, what we want is a ceasefire, and we want, the freeing the hostages and a ceasefire and end of hostilities and whatever. So you had a resolution just that was basically submitted, or the text was co-sponsored, by the way, by Algeria, Denmark, Greece, Guyana, Pakistan, Panama, South Korea, Sierra Leone, Slovenia, Somalia, Russia, China, France, and the UK. So you have this resolution, which has been changed a million times since every other resolution had been vetoed, to include an immediate and permanent ceasefire, freeing basically all the hostages, which they wanted to make sure that and then comes the vetoed resolution, which also called the situation in Gaza catastrophic and demanded the immediate and unconditional lifting of all restrictions on the entry of humanitarian aid into Gaza. Isn't this what everybody says they want to see happening? And it's safe and unhindered distribution at scale, including by the UN and humanitarian partners. Just this is the fifth time that the U.S. has vetoed the Security Council draft ceasefire resolution in the past 2 years in order to protect Israel.
Yeah, and this one is particularly stark and bizarre because let's not forget, in the last 10 days, Jamal, Rubio and Trump both said, oh, we have a good feeling about ceasefire talks with Hamas and the Israelis. And, remember that? That was just, 6, 7, 8 days ago. And now we have the United States clearly coming down on the side of continuing the genocide. It's the same rubbish that we get from the United States, United Nations, Security Council representation, Jamal. It's the same rubbish that the United States has been doing forever. I mean, listen, when the history books are written, the United States is going to go down in history as a genocide supporter, a genocide enabler, and they're going to go down in the history books as being complicit and legally and morally and ethically responsible for this catastrophic genocide. They're just, doing what they do in the United Nations, despite what the world is saying.
Well, listen, I don't want the United States to go in the history books as a country that supports genocide. But at the same time, the new language addresses all the other objections from before. As I said, this is the fifth time that the U.S. has vetoed this resolution.
They don't care. They don't care.
There was a similar resolution in November under the Biden administration. And then they said, the reason they vetoed it, they said on the grounds that the ceasefire demand was not directly linked to the immediate and unconditional release of all hostages held by Hamas. In this resolution, they say that specifically. That includes it's a ceasefire, allowing all the aid to go into Gaza, releasing all the hostages. Hamas itself said that they won't be in power. I don't know what else they want, frankly. I mean, do they want to see
we know what
all
they want.
2 million people in Gaza die before they approve something?
That's exactly the plan, Jamal. That's exactly the plan. They can make all the corrections they want. The United States does not want peace. The United States does not want an end to the genocide. I would even go as far to say, Jamal, the United States doesn't even want the release of the hostages. I mean, it's clear that they've hitched their wagon, not the people, but this administration with Rubio at the helm of the State Department are full steam ahead on this genocide. That they clearly are. I mean, this resolution is so watered down in so many ways. And if you look at the countries that have involved who signed it, it's a broad mosaic of countries, allies of the United States. I mean, really deep. I mean, there's France and the UK, Jamal, who signed on to this. And yet the United States saw fit to veto it. It's an insult to humanity. It's an insult to the world. And as I said, Jamal, when the history books are written, United States and Israel are co-conspirators, co-collaborators in this genocide.
You've been listening to Arab Talk on KPOO San Francisco 89.5 FM. Go to our website, arabtalkradio.com, to download the latest shows, and we'll talk to you next week.
See you next week.